The United States government is pro-GMO. The FDA is mandated to promote biotechnology. The EPA, if you look at the secret documents made public from a recent lawsuit defending people who had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, it turns out that the texts and emails back and forth between Monsanto and EPA, they had a lapdog named Jess Rowland who worked on Monsanto's behalf to try and get another government organization to not do research on the links between Roundup and cancer. It even said to them, if I can stop the research, I should get a medal. And then he was in charge of the committee that reviewed the cancer properties of Roundup and said, no problem. So it demonstrates the situation. In fact, if you look at the Monsanto papers, which are available online, it paints a very scary picture of collusion and manipulation. The USAID is pro-Monsanto. The State Department, if you look at the WikiLeaks, it turns out that the ambassador to Spain wrote to Washington saying that he met with the director of Monsanto in the region, and he wanted government to help the government of Spain to make a more pro-GMO policy and to put pressure on Brussels. The ambassador to France wrote to Washington that the countries that were resistant to GMOs, they should draw up a retaliation list and cause some pain. So these are the enforcement wings of Monsanto. There are no peer-reviewed published human feeding trials, human clinical trials whatsoever. There's only one human feeding study that fed people one meal, and they confirmed that genes can transfer from genetically modified crops into the DNA of gut bacteria. That was published by Nature Biotechnology in February of 2004. The independent researchers, a handful of studies, a few dozen, the real safety studies show real problems. The biotech industry studies, they claim show no problems, and there's only a very few that qualify as safety studies. A lot of them are not published. But when a team in France reanalyzed 3 of Monsanto's studies on corn fed to rats, they found so many abnormalities, they showed consistent signs of toxicity in the liver and kidneys of the rats, which Monsanto ignored and covered up. Most of the studies on GMOs are paid for by the biotech industry, and we have documented how they have rigged the research to avoid finding problems. They have bad science down to a science. What they do is they overcook samples, they use the wrong statistics, the wrong detection methods, they'll use outlandish assumptions. If they don't get what they want in their own control groups, they'll just look to other control groups from other studies, which is not supposed to be done in real science. And even then, when they find problems, they dismiss it out of hand, saying it's not treatment related, with no justification. The biotech industry has a massive machine which they've created. They focus on convincing academics, media, politicians, and farmers. And if anyone comes up with any statement against GMOs that's of any significance, they'll try and jump all over that with their team of echo chambers, which is the false fronts, the so-called scientists, etc. They even have a program to attack anything in social media, so that any statement against Monsanto or GMOs in Facebook gets a troll response. So they have armies of trolls that they've paid and trained to take the pro-GMO position and work on behalf of Monsanto, but not disclose that. So they're very, very well organized and disciplined, and they also have taken over many of the regulatory agencies. I travel to 45 countries, and I very often will be talked to by the local activists and told which agencies or which ministers of a government are basically marching lockstep with Monsanto. And they don't usually invite me to talk to them, and if they do, they pay little attention to what I say, whereas the other independent governments do invite me to speak to them and testify, et cetera, et cetera. So I have talked to minority members of approval bodies that pull their hair out saying the pro-GM scientists that have been put on this committee that are in the majority that always pass, they don't even read the submissions. They just rubber stamp everything. And when people actually from the minority show problems, then the majority say, oh, it's been discredited. No matter where it's from, no matter where it's published, no matter what it says, they said it's discredited. The Supreme Court of India asked a very, very prominent scientist, P.M. Bhargava, to be a part of the approval process in India to evaluate it in response to a citizen's petition. And after 10 months, he said it's a total sham, that they do not evaluate any GMOs properly, and it's a rubber stamp situation. And they tried to discredit Bhargava. I kind of knew I was making a difference when the biotech machinery aimed at me and put me in their crosshairs. They tried to discredit me. They created websites against me. They were completely just giving false junk science and wrong information. They attacked my book, Genetic Roulette, by misquoting the book. When I put the book out, I said, okay, I'm going to create, I said there's 65 health risks of GMOs. Here they are. I have 65 pages ready to listen to and record your criticisms, your oppositions, your questions. I will post them, and then we'll have a worldwide debate. I never heard a peep from them. But 3 years later, they created their own website where they attacked the book, misquoted the book, and just dusted off the same false scientific theories that had been disproven in the book. And it was craftily named and constructed so it gives the impression that it's real science, even though later on we found out that the so-called independent scientists were paid by Monsanto to do it.